I want to take us into the passage that I preached on not that long ago. I think it was at the end of May, which is the Acts 2:42 to 47, which is this description of the early church, which is a very rich description that people often look back to as if only we could get back to what that early church was like. So, for example, you can look at Christian movements, churches, church leaders often will be pointing at this passage. Monastic movements, like all sorts of things throughout church history, often look back to this paragraph, Acts 2:42 to 47. And you've got it printed there. And what I want to do is to get you thinking together about this for a few minutes in regard to a few things. First of all, community and hospitality as a huge theme that comes out in this passage. But then secondly, what are the things they were focused on? What are the things they were devoted to? And what's interesting to me is many of the values you can see in Acts 2:42 to 47, although they very much describe a healthy church, to me they also describe a healthy small group. And also, frankly, if the larger a church gets, the more the small group needs to function like a mini church within it. And so so to me, it's really important and for the health of Holy Trinity and St. Andrews that we have lots of small groups, because there's something that you don't get from a large gathering that you do get from a small group. And much of that is what we see here, the kind of ability for rich community, connection with others. And again, so first of all, the community aspect, but then secondly, kind of what were their values and what are they focusing on? And there may be some points of that where you go, well, hold on, no, I think I'm happy for that to be the large group gathering, like when we meet on a Sunday as church. But you also may notice some things that you think very much should happen at a small group level, and so we can wrestle with that. And so on tables, you've got those pieces of paper, and what I want to do first of all, that will help us, I think, get under the surface a bit, is just to ask this question. Can you think of any examples of tangible community that have been really significant, maybe even to you? Like, what makes it a good example? What, and then even what makes it work? And let me give you an example just to get you thinking to start. One example I could give is the first week of university. Don't know if you guys remember that sort of time. The first week of university, for some reason, there is the ability to make friendships in the first week of university like no other time, because everyone is cut off from their roots. They are kind of dislocated in a way, but they're establishing themselves in a new place. And all of a sudden, every person you meet, it can be a friendship. And I remember at that time, for example, there was one guy who would always come into my dorm room, and I had a fan, but it was missing the grill on the front sort of thing. And his thing was to come into my dorm room, and this dusty, horrible fan, his thing was to come into my dorm room and stop it with his tongue, okay? And I mean, a few weeks in, I just remember thinking like, I know him too well now, I don't know his name, but I can't ask it anymore, right? He's so comfortable, he does this every day, comes into my dorm room and stops my fan with his tongue, and like, you know, you get the idea, but that first week of university.
I couldn't tell you because he lost his tongue into it.
Yeah. But that first week of university is powerful for community. But then you got to ask the question, why is it powerful? Is there any way that you can replicate that in other places? Is there anything you can take from that with your small group? See what I mean? See what I'm thinking? So I want to get under the surface of what causes community to work or not work, but especially if you can think of encouraging examples. Where have you seen tangible, powerful examples of community, and what makes it a good example? Why does it work? So share some things with each other and just see if you can get kind of under the surface of this thing that we call community a little bit. Go for it. Let me ask for some quick, tangible examples of community. What are some things that you came up with?
School.
Okay, school? What do you mean?
Well, if you work in a school, or if you're a parent in a school and everybody gets to know each other, and then they go into each other's houses and they play with their children. And
so there's a phase of school life with parents connecting with each other, with students connecting with each other. Yeah.
We talked about having a common aim, common interest. For me, it was sport at university. For other people, it's different things. But you have a common thing that you all engage in together.
Common interest groups.
Yeah.
That could be all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
One that I've noticed that's powerful is when parents are the kind of what's it called? The group where you learn how to have a baby and then you have a baby.
NCT classes.
NCT classes. Man, some of the friendships that people make through these things last, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Tangel.
Lived in a lifestyle Christian community for 10 years.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Which was, everything was shared. Everything, income, property was poured into a common purse, we called it, where then each household was given so much money per person. But we had a common interest, a vision.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You can see a bunch of things that they're taking from Acts 2. Definitely, yep. Yeah. Now, I want to go the next step of just kind of going, oh yeah.
Out of that, this was 50 years ago when I went, 60 years ago when I went. But this weekend, I've just been sailing with 10 people that we lived together 50 years ago.
Oh yes, there you go. Now here's something I want you to hear very clearly because I think it's really important to say. Community can't be forced, it can only be nurtured.
Yes.
Right? Community growing, community whatever. Like if you identify something that seems to be connected to healthy community, you can't force a bunch of people. You can't sit a bunch of people in a circle and go, we're all going to share our deepest secrets with each other. Right? But it can very well, if sudden over a meal or over something, it can't be forced. It can only be nurtured. If over a meal, or something like that, or some worship songs around a fire, or something like that, people share deep things with each other, then all of a sudden there's a level of intimacy and community that happens there. Again, but you can't force that to happen. Now, with the examples that you've got, or others that you could think of, I want to go a step deeper, and I want to go, what's the soil? What's the thing about that, or that you can identify as being something that kind of nurtures healthy community? What are the categories? What are the ideas? What are the things that we can think about if we kind of pull it to pieces? Because then we're going to ask the question, can these things be brought into a small group? Okay? So I'm asking you to kind of go a little bit deeper, to pull some of these examples to pieces and figure out what works in a small group setting. What does that look like? So continue, go for it. Yeah, let's pull back together. I can tell the groups are firing, which is fantastic, but I also have a lot of ground that we want to cover. So let me just kind of raise the question right now and just hear from some people. If there are some categories to think about that have come out of different examples that you've looked at, categories that you might be able to apply in a small group setting, what might they be? Or what might be a thing that you could think about for your small group from what you've looked at?
trust and confidentiality.
Fantastic. Trust and confidentiality. Interesting. And then thinking about, now notice with the last things, for you as a leader, how you lead on this is difficult. It's not cut and dry, it's not straightforward. However, as a leader, sometimes you have the power that no one else in the group has to be able to set standards. So, like I remember with a youth group that I was leading once, and there was a situation that happened, and I somewhat forcibly told off one of the youth in the middle of that group and I said, no, this is a safe space and that is not allowed. And it set a standard for the whole group that helped the group go forward. That was the early days of that group. I worked with that youth so that they didn't continue and they weren't ostracized in the group, but it meant a standard was set for the group that then helped the group to become healthy and grow. And it grew significantly, and that's one of the things in the mix. But that was, as a leader, I'm having to look at this and go, how do I change this dynamic from a youth setting where they tear each other apart to a place where the vulnerable are protected, right? And I have the potential to do something there as a leader. With trust and vulnerability, you have the ability as a leader to set parameters of the expectations on the group that enable trust and vulnerability. Commitment, yeah, excellent. And that can be difficult if you've got a bunch of parents of young children, or we'd have to be mindful of the life stages people are in. But
also there is the bit where I'm a bit tired tonight, I've got something else to do.
We are in a battle after all, it's a spiritual battle. The enemy doesn't want us to like meet together and encourage each other. There's always going to be a little bit of that. You've got to push through it.
And it's commitment from the leaders as well.
Yeah.
You meet every week, even if there's only 3 people coming,
Yeah.
you don't then say, oh, there's only 3 tonight, we'll
Yeah.
bother, because
yeah, it's tricky because if you get on the back foot where you're just going, oh, we'll cancel again, we'll cancel again, we'll cancel again, it sends a message that it's not important, is it? But there might be times where it's the right thing to cancel, like, you know, where it's appropriate. So I don't want to be too hard and fast on any of this. You have to figure out as a leader. Again, there's very much a leadership thing with a lot of this stuff. I'll throw in the mix relational dynamics. Again, relational dynamics really tricky, but I heard it out of this group a little bit, the idea of what do you do, like the person who's not talking, to pull that person out of their shell is incredibly important for them to feel part of the group. But also, if they do, it can benefit the whole group. And so there's a funny thing of like, for your group, sometimes you need the extrovert to be there. Sometimes the person you want assisting your group, you might need, if you have a bunch of introverts, you might pull an extrovert in as a person who assists the group because it enables them to talk more and pull people in. But if they override the group so that they don't, they also need to enable them to recognize the quiet person and pull them out of their shell. Do you see the kind of like relational dynamics? Again, though, but you're a leader, like how do you help that? Anybody else? Categories or things we could think about?
We said no judgment.
Brilliant, thank you. I hope you're realizing some of these things are really complicated, but it's helpful and it's important, right?
Something about continued sort of contact and support in the middle of the week, you know, between meetings. That sense of checking in, you know, when situations are ongoing or fairly, just tricky. You know, how did the interview go? Did you get the job? You know, just that's more superficial level. But you know, keeping tabs on people's life circumstances that are ongoing and extra times to meet up and pray or whatever.
Yeah.
As and when, or do practical things if that's relevant.
Yeah. Or even notice something. Let me come to you in just a second. Notice something that for many of us will go, well, prayer is part of our small group. It's an important, valuable thing. Prayer can either be something that enables and aids community or something that's dead, and the difference is I feel like it's in how you do it. So in other words, you can do prayer where people are sharing of their needs and they're sharing their heart with each other, and other people are caring for them and praying for them and bringing them to God. That's a powerful thing. Or prayer can be like, well, here's the things. Anybody have anything else? And that can just be in how it's done. And some of you guys will naturally do that beautifully. And some people, like myself, I need to be careful about that because I can be so focused on what have we learned that I don't almost give the relational space for that prayer time to be community building. Anyways, kind of interesting to think about. Here I go.
Something that's developed over the last year for us, unexpectedly really, I mean we meet weekly, we always have, and that's continuing. But now we've got a WhatsApp group, which is our home group WhatsApp group. And amazingly, just about everybody takes part in that.
Yes.
And they put prayer requests on it, or they put local information on it.
Yeah, okay.
Send snaps from their holidays. So it's another level of communication and things you can pray about for that person.
Especially if somebody isn't coming, that can't come to house group because they're ill or their family's ill. Please can you pray for? It's immediate and we know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you can follow it up.
And they're still kind of keeping up with the people that...
You don't have to wait another week to find out what's going on.
We have one of those short ones.
Unexpectedly successful.
Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Anybody else? Things that help community. I mean, some things are going to get profound and hard to figure out what does that look like. So for example, university, one of the things that helps community is that they're all stuck in the same place, right? Or that they're going through similar circumstances, or there's lots of things that, that you can't necessarily make part of your home group. But there are things, for example, there's something profound about building community that happens after the event is over. So like sometimes it might be that you finished at 8:30, but no one needs to leave till 9. And in fact, you've got something for them to stick around. So they're basically hanging out until 9. And because they've been hanging out already for a while, the conversation flows easily and there's deep community happening. Whereas there wouldn't have been if you just packed it full of stuff. Or having a time where maybe it's a summer barbecue as a small group can be incredibly powerful for that community forming sort of thing, forming actual relationships and not just kind of going through studies together or that sort of thing. Yeah.
Listening to each other's story,
Yeah.
sharing your story, kind of really important.
Yeah. Something that's powerful for the staff team recently is because we have once a week we have a prayer time together. And we said for a little while, each week we'll have a different person just share their personal story of how they came to faith. And just like as a 5-minute sort of thing, but all of a sudden we're getting to know things about people, that you wouldn't know. Yeah.
That's a really good point, actually. We did that testimonies. It's so powerful, so amazing. The stuff that you didn't know about that person was just so inspiring. And then it just broke lots of barriers down, actually.
Yeah.
That we all took turns doing that.
And you might have to adjust if you have people that are kind of on the edge of faith but aren't Christians yet, or in your group, that sort of thing. You might figure out how you do that in a way that includes them and doesn't, but they also again could be inspired by the stories of other people.
But listening to John's story today, we all probably learned something about him that we didn't already know.
Yeah. Yeah. Take a moment right now and as a group, look at the passage in Acts and just see what do you see, what examples of community do you see there? Or practically, what did they do? What were they focused on that maybe you can be challenged by in a small group setting? Again, we don't have long for this, but go through that together. Go for it. So I hope that you're challenged by Acts 2:42-47. It's a beautiful passage of scripture, and you can dig into some of the phrases there and that sort of thing because there's a lot of depth.